Los pros comienzan el día aprovechando los servicios exclusivos en Lowe's. No solo ofrecemos clavos, tendrás aire comprimido gratis para tus ruedas y tanques portátiles, estacionamiento de remolques para pros cuando vengas de compras, un lugar para limpiar tu parabrisas y una bebida energética para despertarte. Aquí tu día empieza más rápido pagando en cajeros solo para pros. Por eso Lowe's es el nuevo hogar de los pros, solo en Estados Unidos.
Hey guys, this is Gail Kim from Impact Wrestling, and you are listening to the 8-Bit Suplex Podcast.
All right, welcome everybody to a special edition of the 8-Bit Suplex here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. I am your host, Josh McLaughlin. I'm joined by my friend. You've heard him before on a previous podcast. Longtime gamer, longtime friend, Mr. Layne Farmen. Layne, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I'm happy to be here again. Love helping out and talking about games. So I'm doing good.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a really special edition here because we have just now, Layne, hit last month 25 years of the Nintendo 64.
Wow.
It makes me feel exceptionally old.
Yeah.
We are in the past 25 years, we've graduated high school, college, had children, and the Nintendo 64 has not aged extremely gracefully.
It has more gracefully.
Yeah, we decided for 25 years we were going to do a top 25 list, and it became very difficult after the first 15 or so to kind of, slot in some of these other ones because it is a little bit difficult. The catalog is not as vast as some of the other systems of the 90s and not as good. But, we can kind of talk. I mean, what was kind of your experience, Layne, with the Nintendo 64 in its heyday?
Well, it's funny. So I was thinking about it. You just said 25 years. I was 4. So, but I remember it being around. I remember seeing it at the mall. I thought that the purple atomic one was cool looking. And I think it was $100. By the time that I actually saw one in the wild, it was being sold at a store for $100. My parents never got me the new stuff. So when I was 4, I was playing the NES. I think you had kind of a similar experience.
Yep.
Then when I moved, I was like, I don't even remember how old I was. They bought me a Super Nintendo at a garage sale when I was like 7 or 8. So they were slowly, I was always
you were getting there.
Yeah. The first time I really played N64 was at a Walmart, craning my neck up at the screen to play Diddy Kong Racing.
Oh man,
that was my first experience.
Yeah, so I mean, great call out to the Walmart demo stations because those were absolutely terrible, and not designed for any. I mean, for a giraffe. That might have been who they designed those for, because unless you were a child of the 90s and went to Walmart to try the new game that they had on display, you don't know what we're talking about. But basically, imagine if you were standing profile against a wall and looking straight up at a television screen while also holding a controller that is just like got about 6 inches of leeway from the wall. And it was pathetic.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
I don't know why Walmart did it for so long that way. And then now they've obviously long since there's no demo stations in stores anymore. I think even the ones at GameStop are just videos. I don't know what's playable anymore. Although I don't remember the last time I went into a GameStop. My local Oldsmar one here shut down. So,
oh man.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it stinks, but such is the way, man. Slowly going the way of the buffalo, as they say. Yeah. But yeah, so the Nintendo 64 released in September of 1996, and it was the first console I remember buying when it came out. And by buying, I mean my brother bought it. He saved up his allowance for like 5 years, in anticipation of what was going to come after the Super Nintendo, and so he took that and he went and bought the Nintendo 64 and the 2 launch games, which were Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. They did not release another game for that system for like a month and a half after that in the States. But we definitely played our hearts out. And so, you know, it was a good time. You know, I mean, we really enjoyed our 64. I still am in possession of it. My brother kind of didn't hold on to a lot of his old gaming gear as he got older and decided that he didn't care about games as much as I did. So I still have my original Nintendo 64, complete with the expansion pack.
Yes, that's important.
It is very important, especially for the games that require it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Layne, it took your system from 64 megs to, I believe, 128. Is that what it was?
It's something like that. Yeah. And what was I going to say? Oh, I was going to ask you too. How much were those launch titles? Because I remember seeing, weren't they like $80 when
I think they were 70. I think they were 70. And what's crazy about that is that, like, I don't remember Super Nintendo games being more than like $20 or $30, and that may just be because I was super young when I was buying them. But yeah, so yeah, and I misspoke. It wasn't 64 megs in the 64.
It wasn't.
It was 4 megs of memory, and the expansion pack is an additional 4 megs of memory.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes. Of course, the 64 is in reference to the colors bits and stuff like that that I go around 64 bit. You'll excuse this podcast for getting. I mean, you know, we're the 8-bit suplex, not the 64-bit suplex, after all.
Right. That's right.
But yeah, no, I remember those games being exceptionally expensive, and I don't recall any reason in particular why. It's just the way it was, and we accepted it, and we shelled out $70 and occasionally $80 for like a title that would include like a memory pack, or it would include a rumble pack. If you remember, the Nintendo 64 controller is largely hailed as one of the worst controllers of all time. I don't feel that way personally, but that's because I played with it from the start. But I cannot to this day use a Nintendo 64 controller without at least a rumble pack in the back of it. I just can't because it feels too light, you know?
I get the same. So the PS3 controller was like that, where obviously there was no way to fix it other than like strapping a barbell to it or something. But the PS3 controller has a similar weight to it as the N64 controller.
It does.
Sans rumble pack. And I had the same feeling when I first started playing, like, I don't know, Killzone 2 or whatever I was playing on PS3.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of debate about that controller. I mean, the Nintendo 64 controller, the control stick had some problems. You know, especially when in a title we'll get into here shortly, with Mario Party and things like that, where you would have to spam rotating that stick. And I mean, I know that there was like class action lawsuits filed about that stick, from like people rubbing blisters into their thumbs to just outright just breaking the control stick. And those controllers were not cheap, and Nintendo still doesn't sell cheap controllers, as it turns out. But we love them nonetheless.
Good luck finding an N64 controller with a joystick that operates as it's intended to. That will almost never happen. I have one. So I've been collecting for a long time. I think I have 5 N64 controllers. Only one of them is worth anything in terms of the joystick. So
yeah, I mean, you can buy third-party ones now, obviously, that they sell in like retro game stores with reinforced control sticks and better things, but it's not authentic, you know. No. If it doesn't say Nintendo in the middle, I don't want to pick it up. That's right.
That's right.
I know that you operate the same way, Layne, but
yeah,
maybe we're the wrong ones. I don't know. But that's I think that's enough backstory about the system, the controller. If you want more of it, obviously there's plenty of things on the internet about the Nintendo 64 and kind of how it revolutionized the way that games were played. It was a system that was born out of an era that was switching to discs, and it cost Nintendo a lot of exclusivity, that kind of continued. I mean, this was the first branch off of Nintendo losing a lot of third-party support. That's continued on the way through now into the Switch, and Switch is starting to get some of that more, even though they're still using cartridges. But yeah, the Nintendo 64, I mean, up until this point, every Final Fantasy game was a Nintendo exclusive. They lose that ability with Final Fantasy VII because it was much too large of a game, and Square said, we need to run this thing on a disc, and they put it on 3 discs. There's not really a way to do that with the cartridge. So, I mean, I think I'd read somewhere, Layne, like to have Final Fantasy 7 fit on a cartridge, it would have taken like 60 cartridges.
Oh, that's
Which if we're paying $70 a cart retail, that's not going to work out too well.
that is so cool to think about. And you wonder, is it because of the soundtrack too? Because I know that was a big thing.
That is a big part of it. The sound, because we're getting away from some of the synth kind of sounds and things like that were prevalent in the Super Nintendo, right? Obviously, there's great music from the Final Fantasy series in the Super Nintendo, but that was a lot of pixelated loops that were not very large in size. And the way that the medium has progressed, you need to have these big musical scores, and so Nintendo lost a lot of that. So as we go through this list, you'll see a lot of 64 exclusive games, a lot of first-party games, and then the other thing that's prevalent is Rare. Rare did a lot with the 64, and they were one of the only companies to do so. So yeah, I think we can get right into it, Layne. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. I thought I've never thought about this forming the trajectory of the rest of Nintendo sort of as the first party system. But that's really true, because if you look at the Super Nintendo library, so much crosses between SNES and Genesis, like so much.
Yeah.
And that just kind of vanishes almost overnight with the N64. So no, that's really cool.
And then they doubled down, and they said, all right, fine, we'll do discs, but they're going to be super small.
Yeah, right. What in the world is that?
Yeah, so, and hey, you know what? When the GameCube hits 25 years, we'll talk more about that.
Oh, that's it'd be a lot of fun.
That, I think we could do a little bit more fun of a list.
Oh, yeah.
But here we go. We'll start first with an honorable mention, and we'll start with the honorable mention, Pokemon Snap, which first came out in 1999. On the Nintendo 64. Pokemon Snap is, of course, a stylized version of a rail shooter, in the sense that you are literally on a rail. You cannot go forwards or backwards. You are set in a predetermined motion. But in the difference between this and any other Pokemon game is that you are literally taking pictures of them. It was a interesting concept when it came out. People were kind of like, oh, we wanted a real Pokemon game on 64. And I think that's probably why this doesn't go higher on the list. It's because it's not a true Pokemon game. They did at least the new Pokemon Snap. That is the title, New Pokemon Snap, on the Nintendo Switch. And it's gotten a lot of critical praise. It's a beautiful game. Definitely worth checking out, both the original on the 64 and the new one on the Switch. But I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. I mean, it can be frustrating at times where you're sitting there going down your path and you miss by a hair, you miss the Doug Trio sticking its third head out of the ground. And, it's an all right game. You're going to see a lot of that at the start of this list as games that are all right. But yeah, especially with the honorable mentions, I'll go Pokemon Snap for the first honorable mention here, Layne.
Cool. So it's interesting. You're making me think about the system limitations. I mean, that's why they couldn't have a Pokemon game on N64, right? Because they couldn't. It takes 60 cartridges or whatever. So we didn't actually get a quote unquote real system Pokemon game until the Switch, right? Until Sword and Shield.
Yeah, I mean, well, technically, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee were on there first, which are basically reskins of Pokemon Yellow.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
But yes, an original would be the Switch.
Yeah. So my first honorable mention is going to be a game I never played. I just want to play it. That's why it's an honorable mention. And it's Ogre Battle 64. So Josh and I both big RPG gamers. Talk a lot about RPGs and the famous what is it, the one night marathon playthrough of Final Fantasy 7 that you did one time. Anyway, there's not really any RPGs on the N64. There are some, and I'm really interested in those. I love playing weird games on systems. So the one game that I just really want to get is Ogre Battle 64. All the footage I see, this game looks super cool, like kind of a top-down kind of strategy game. It looks like nothing that I've ever played on the N64. And so I needed to include this because it's one of the only games of its kind on the system. And it is highly regarded. I mean, people think it's a good game. So that's going to be my first honorable mention, even though I never had the pleasure of playing it.
Yeah, it's worth talking about. This is a game that comes out right about the same time that Final Fantasy Tactics does. And so that top-down strategy style is pretty popular at this time. So definitely looks like one that is worth checking out for sure.
Cool.
And this might be our first eyebrow raiser, so to speak, of this list, and why this one is only an honorable mention. And it is partly because of what would happen in to the controller and what would, we mentioned it previously. The honorable mention is Mario Party. So we're probably going to get some flack for this. Mario Party is a fun party game. It is, but you have to remember that this is Nintendo 64. The only way to play multiplayer is sitting next to your buddy on the couch. And that can, a lot of times you want to play something by yourself. This is not a game to play by yourself. In the era of consoles not being connected to the internet, you really needed a good single player mode. And I can hear people now saying, well, but the point was multiplayer. Yeah, I understand that. But there are plenty of other multiplayer games that had a playable single player mode. So that's why Mario Party is just an honorable mention.
I think that it's good that it's an honorable mention because this game created a genre of games that is mostly awful. So I mean, it's the sins of this game put it on honorable. I mean, I think the worst one is Sonic Shuffle. That's one of the worst games I've ever played. But a lot of people say there's an Animal Crossing one on the Wii U called like Harvest Festival or something like that.
Yeah, that game is terrible. We don't need to bring that one up. It's really bad.
But just to say that's this game is lucky to be an honorable mention because this genre does not do super well.
It doesn't.
Oh, and the next honorable mention. So I had to put this one on there. Like I said, I love strange games on systems. Mega Man 64. I think it's the only Mega Man game. I'm super into Mega Man. We need to do an episode on Mega Man one day, actually. Maybe on one of those anniversaries. But the fact that there's a Mega Man game on the N64, that makes me happy. And it's a port of Mega Man Legends, which is a great game. Arguably, it has its fans. It's a little bit polarizing. People love it or hate it. It's a good dungeon crawler, in my opinion. Weird direction for Mega Man. The reason it's an honorable mention is it's not, like I said, it's not exclusive and it's not that much different from Mega Man Legends. I just am glad that it exists. I recently paid $350 for a copy of Mega Man on Game Gear. For the same reason, because I'm just glad that these strange games exist. And so that's why it is on my honorable mention list.
Yeah, that's a weird flex. But okay.
It's true. Well, that's a hard game to find.
Well, it's a good thing your wife's not in the room to relive that with you. But yeah, no, I mean, it is I was not a big Mega Man 64 guy, but I know that you were, and Mega Man in general, I think is a series that when it sticks to its true platforming, and this is an aside, obviously we revisit this on a future date. When Mega Man's at its purest platforming, it's amongst the best. And then I think a lot of times when it tries to do other stuff, it really suffers. And it has weird titles, and there's no reason why like a soccer game in the Mega Man universe should exist, but it does. But again, that's perhaps a topic for another time.
You got to play that. I have it. Come over and play
it. Well, next time I'm in Oklahoma, we'll play, strap up and sit next to each other on the couch. But we're going to start now with the official list. We're going to go from 25 to 1. And as you're looking at the title for this episode, you'll notice it is part 1. We are going to go 25 down through 11, probably in part 1. We'll see how long we go here, but part 2, I think, is the meat and potatoes, which is going to be your top 10. So without further ado, number 25 is Blast Corps. Blast Corps is a 1997 game developed by Rare. As previously mentioned, Rare is a company that did a lot of work on the N64. And Blast Corps is it's hard to describe it as a singular genre, but if you play it, you know why I'm struggling to find a way to talk about it. But I think the synopsis that Wikipedia gives is pretty great. It says it's a game in which the player uses vehicles to destroy buildings in the path of a runaway nuclear missile carrier. That is exactly what the game is. But you have to figure out what the different vehicles are good at, right? So like there's a faster car that you have to like power slide and tail whip into buildings to like knock them over. There's giant mechs that you can use to take out skyscrapers. And each level has a different level like amount of time that you have to complete the task. So it's a really fun game. If you haven't played it, definitely try and find it. I don't know what the carts are going to go for these days.
Ooh, I can pull some of that up if you want. Let me see.
But I mean, I'm pulling it up if I can. It actually doesn't look too bad. Probably like in that $20 range. You could probably find it. So check out your local video game store. So
yeah, we got that. Oh man, completing. Oh yeah, no, yeah, you're right. The new price, if you're gonna buy this shrink wrapped, it's like $300. But I mean, I want to
don't do that. No, don't do that. Yeah, it's
$15.
It's not that much of a collector's item to warrant buying it new in box.
No, I never understood. I never understood that.
Yeah, so that's number 25. Rolling on up to number 24, Paper Mario. Like Layne mentioned, there's not a whole lot of RPG action in the Nintendo 64, but we do have Paper Mario. Paper Mario is kind of a return for Nintendo to try and get Mario back in an RPG. And we have Super Mario RPG, which is released at the end of the Super Nintendo's life. In fact, it comes out in March of 96. And like we mentioned before, that means that game is also 25 years old. So it comes out the same year the 64 does. Super late. It's the last game that Square Enix does for Nintendo for a long time. So Super Mario RPG, one of the all-time best. Paper Mario, I wouldn't call it an all-time best, but it is, developed by Intelligent Systems. So it's a new developer working with Nintendo, trying to come up with a way to capitalize on the success of RPGs. Is the year 2000. JRPGs are still super huge. Which they've never not been. Nintendo jumps on with Paper Mario and creates a new battle system, creates a new aesthetic, and really finds a way to make a bigger game using less graphical content and really can fit on that cartridge by doing the kind of the 2D cutouts. I think it was a pretty genius move to kind of do that, to be able to continue. Of course, there is further iterations of Paper Mario. Not all of them have been as successful as the first one. Although, the most recent one, I believe, is the Origami King, and that one has been, reviewed much better than the other ones.
Yeah, and is this related to the Superstar Saga too? Did it kind of spawn that?
Yeah, I think that it's loosely related in that Nintendo really loves putting out Mario everything.
Yeah,
and so if they can put out a good Mario RPG, they're going to do it. I mean, it's kind of like they're teaming up right now with Ubisoft, right, to do the Rabbids games.
Oh,
so,
right.
I mean, Nintendo's always looking for a way to branch off and do RPG style games, and then the Rabbids games, of course, are that strategy tactics style. So, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the continuation of that. That was really, I mean, you can trace it all the way back to the last Square Enix Super Nintendo game, which was Super Mario RPG. But that's number 24, Paper Mario.
All right, jumping to number 23, Pokemon Stadium. I was excited about this game when I was a kid, and then I was like re-excited about this game when I was in high school. That's really when I was starting to collect. When I was a kid, of course, the excitement was seeing these Pokemon that were on your Game Boy, fighting in these 3D environments. It's so flashy. I mean, thinking about it now, it is another way to make a Pokemon game on a system with limitations. It can only show, it's like a series of battles. What's cool is that you don't have to have a Pokemon game in order to play it, but one of the coolest peripherals, this is what I was excited about when I was in high school. So it's something that you attach to the back of your controller, and you can put your Game Boy card in that you have all your Pokemon, Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow. You can actually put those Pokemon in the Pokemon Stadium game with their exact experience, moves, everything translates over, and then fight, the gym battles and everything in there. You can fight with your friends. It's just like a really flashy, cool, like better way of doing what the Game Boy already did. And it's a really complete package too. I mean, it's got, the battling is kind of the main thing, the story mode, going through all the gym leaders and the Elite Four and everything. But then there's also a series of mini games. I don't remember if it was pre Mario Party or not, but I think that sometimes me and my friends would just play the mini games more than actually having our Pokemon fight. Like I said, when I was in high school, I got back into Pokemon Red and then got super excited. I think you can even use it like a Super Game Boy, and there's a mode where you can actually play Pokemon through the N64 on your TV, which is amazing and super fun. So, I mean, I don't know. This is just a really, really cool peripheral for the system, and it was the best way to play Pokemon probably until Gold and Silver came out, and then of course they had Pokemon Stadium 2, which I didn't really play, but really, really cool idea there.
Yeah, no, it really is, and the device that you're talking about is the aptly named Transfer Pack. Which when you had your Pokemon game in your transfer pack, there was an option to transfer your Pokemon in, or like you said, you can actually just use it as a pass through to your TV and play on the television your Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow, which is really cool because like you said, the Super Game Boy was the only other way to do that. And the Super Game Boy had some limitations and things. So, but actually that was a really good peripheral too.
Oh yeah, I love that too. Yeah.
So that's number 23.
Cool. Moving to 22, Kirby 64, Kirby and the Crystal Shards. I love Kirby games. Kirby is another one of those, kind of like Josh was saying about Mario, where they just and Pokemon too, where sometimes it seems like they'll do anything but just make a straightforward platformer of Kirby. You got the tilt and tumble on the Game Boy. You got, Kirby's Air Ride for the GameCube, which, by the way, is an extremely rare game now. I don't know if
I have played it. It is impossible to find.
Oh my goodness, those GameCube. That's what's in right now is those GameCube games. So, but Kirby 64, straightforward N64 platformer. And what was so cool about Kirby 64 was it actually had this system where I think they use it in Superstar Saga as well, but this was the first time that I encountered it myself, was in Kirby 64 in the Crystal Shards, where when you could get one ability, just like in Smash Brothers, where Kirby, eats the enemy and then takes their ability. But then if you eat another enemy, you can combine it, or if you eat both their energy or whatever, it combines into a new thing. So one really funny example is, and some of them don't work. So it's a really fun kind of experience because you're testing things out. What does this do? What does that do? What do they do when you combine them? One that I remember is if you get the ice ability, and then I think you combine it with the electric ability. I think it could be something else. You turn into like a refrigerator and you're just like stationary. You can't really do anything. And I haven't played this in a long time, so maybe the fridge had some cool things that you could do, but
I don't think it did. I think it was
okay. But really fun game, beautiful game too. And really good looking. The character designs are really big, so it's a platformer that just looks really beautiful. And yeah, I think this was between Kirby Superstar on the Super Nintendo. There was this platformer. Then there wasn't another Kirby, just regular Kirby platformer for a long time. I think the Game Boy Advance did a couple that were ports.
Right.
And I don't remember when the next new one was. So this was.
I don't know that we have had one, to be perfectly honest, because even the one on the Kirby game on the Switch right now is a free to play, kind of money maker.
Right.
Nolan, my 5-year-old, has played, and has spent some of my money without me knowing. But
oh boy,
it wasn't a big deal. He only spent like $5. He's like, I need more crystals, and then I was like, okay. And then he just did it. I don't know how. I changed the setting on my Switch shortly thereafter, and he now has his own Switch that is very password protected.
Oh, there you go. Well, tell him Kirby and the Crystal Shards. You can get Crystal Shards without microtransactions on the N64.
There you go. Moving right along. This game, when it was released, was thought of as canon. It's since the Disney acquisition not been made canon.
I don't believe it.
But it is Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. And this game was kind of, I don't remember any over-the-shoulder third-person shooters that flowed this well.
Yeah.
Before this one.
I know of one that we'll get to later.
Okay, sure. But this one might have come out first because this one came out in the launch year. It came out December of '96, so it's pretty early on in the life cycle for the 64. The one that you're talking about, of course, I'm sure we'll get to in part 2, and that came out much later.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But this one, what's interesting about it is that it's a Star Wars video game that is based on a novel, and the novel was, I don't even remember it being the most popular of the novels, just simply because Timothy Zahn didn't write it.
I thought he did. I thought Timothy Zahn did. Oh, okay.
Not. I know everyone.
Los pros comienzan el día aprovechando los servicios exclusivos en Lowe's. No solo ofrecemos clavos, tendrás aire comprimido gratis para tus ruedas y tanques portátiles, estacionamiento de remolques para pros cuando vengas de compras, un lugar para limpiar tu parabrisas y una bebida energética para despertarte. Aquí tu día empieza más rápido pagando en cajeros solo para pros. Por eso Lowe's es el nuevo hogar de los pros, solo en Estados Unidos.
Almost to give him credit for that one, but he did not. So
by Steve Perry. Yeah, right. You're right.
So, of course, this follows the story of another Corellian smuggler in the vein of Han Solo, a man named Dash Rendar.
Yep.
And there was not a cooler person in Star Wars than Dash Rendar. And I will fight anyone and everyone who tries to tell me otherwise still to this day, because he was awesome. He was super cool. And what was crazy about this is that after the novel, they made the video game. And then after the video game, they made toys for Shadows of the Empire. No other novel that has not had a feature film, I don't think has ever had toys in the same way that Shadows of the Empire did. Because cool. I did have Dash Rendar and his ship, the Outrider.
Oh, yeah.
As a toy. It was like one of the big Christmas gifts that I got that year. But I've spent all this time talking about it. I haven't even talked about the gameplay. So the game itself is pretty solid. Like I said, it's a third-person shooter. It has, because of the single joystick, and this is a common theme for the Nintendo 64, there is auto-aim to it. So you're able to run and gun. You're taking out stormtroopers. The game places you at the Battle of Hoth for some reason, just because, you know, everyone wanted to have those big walker battles with the speeders, which is revisited later again in another Star Wars game that we'll get to later in the list. But yeah, I mean, it's totally unique. There's jetpacks, there's speeder bikes on Tatooine, there's sewer monsters that scared the piss out of me when I was a kid. I don't know, Layne, this is kind of the first one that we both have a lot of experience with on this list. But I don't know how well you remember that sewer monster where you have to use the jetpack in the sewer water and shoot out like the tentacles and stuff. That just, I had to walk away from the 64 as a 6-year-old playing that game.
My experience, so it's with the sewer monster, but my big sewer monster Star Wars moment was with Dark Forces when I couldn't handle it. And that to this day, it's still really that level still scares the shit out of me when I play it, because those things are so scary. I think they're, what are those things called? The Daigana or I don't remember what the little
I don't know.
But what I remember about Shadows of the Empire is that amazing junk like dump level.
Yeah.
Where you're
on the speeding train
and then oh my goodness. And somehow jumping, I don't know if it's like, maybe it's because the controls aren't super good, but the jumping from train to train, the physics of it still feel really cool when you play that game now. And I don't know if it's because it's dated, but whatever is going on there, like every time you do it, it's like not a guarantee. And so you're really like, it feels
That's
like
true.
this really tense situation, you know? And so I always just really loved that level.
Yeah, no, it's a super fun game. Like you said, the controls are pretty slippy. But you know, I mean, we got Star Wars on and it was 3D. And at that point, like, I think the only other games that we had that were like super good, like you mentioned, Dark Forces was really good as first person, and the Doom kind of aesthetic on the PC. And then we had the Super Star Wars arcade games on the Super Nintendo, which are super fun, but they are platforming. They are, very much, pretty run of the mill. But now we had 3D Star Wars, and that was pretty cool. Now, for the next game on the list, Layne, coming in at what are we at? Number 20 already?
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving right along.
That's right.
So, to understand why this game exists, and then why another game later on the list exists, you have to go back to the late 90s and what Disney / ESPN did, bringing extreme sports to the forefront of our culture.
Oh yeah.
Nothing cooler than the X Games in the 90s. Which I've talked about on previous episodes when in discussing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. But this is the winter aspect of it. Snowboarding, I swear to God, the sales of snowboards must have gone up 700% in the late 90s, because everybody wanted to be snowboarding. Disney Channel releases the movie Johnny Tsunami. The Winter X Games launch, and Nintendo 64, we get 1080 snowboarding.
Oh yeah.
Which is the first snowboarding game that I ever played. And what's crazy about this is that the game was actually developed and published by Nintendo. They made this game. It's a first party game that many people I don't think of that way, Layne.
No, I don't think they do. And this game is so much fun. It looks great. And I think the speed of it is what really struck me. The downhill aspect of it and the speed that's conveyed gives you just a really different sense than you get from other snowboarding games. And I played some of the other franchises, like what was it called? Cool Borders? Is that what it's called?
That's the one that was on PlayStation. I think that was 989 Sports.
Yeah, and it just doesn't feel the same. I think there's something special about 1080. You can feel the snow hit your face, when you go downhill. It's just it's a great thing.
It was really good, and it is a downhill racing game. There's certain limitations, I think, when you talk about doing snowboards, like you said, to convey the massiveness of the mountains and the speed at which that you're traveling, and the way they were able to do that. I don't really understand how or why they were able to do it. But yeah, 1080 snowboarding, cracking the list at 20 here. We didn't get a follow-up until I think it was called 1080 Avalanche.
I really want to play that. I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
On the GameCube. And that game was a lot of fun too. Or it's actually called 1080 Silver Storm in Japan, as I've just learned. But it was actually, that one was also published and developed by Nintendo. So it remained a pretty constant entry there for them as a developer. And they need to put a new one on the Switch. I'm going to tell them
that would be so much fun. Yeah.
But we have to go back to the land of Rare for number 19. Yep. This is a very late game in the cycle for the Nintendo 64. And so there's a game that we'll get to later on the list called Diddy Kong Racing. I won't tell you where it is on the list. You'll have to wait. You'll have to tune in later to keep listening to find out where. But they have a racer in that game named Conker. And Conker is this cute little squirrel, friends with everyone. And we were given this promise for years that a platforming game was going to come out from Rare for Conker. And everyone was like, man, when's this game coming? When's this game coming? It gets pushed back. It has development problems. And then out of the blue, I get a Nintendo Power. I was subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time, with Conker, like, holding a machine gun. I don't remember the exact cover.
Or like a cigarette or something.
Right, yeah. But we get an extremely mature, and I don't know how the game stayed at a mature rating, but an extremely mature game filled with gore, filled with nonstop dick jokes. There's I want to say there's like partial like cartoon nudity, and then there's also extremely good gameplay. So it is a adventure game, kind of platformer, but also with guns. There are levels that are inspired by The Matrix, which of course was a big movie at the time, and it's one of the first games to use bullet time, where of course the world slows down except for you, and you can do dives and shoot and things like that.
Man. Before Max Payne.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Because this did come out in 2001. So I'm not sure. Let me see. I'm going to do a real-time fact check here to see if Max Payne. Max Payne.
Oh, man, it is so close. You're right. Oh, my gosh.
So Max Payne comes out July 23rd of 2001. Conker's Bad Fur Day comes out March 5th of 2001.
Oh, got him.
So
wow.
Conker beats Max Payne to the market with bullet time by 3 months.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, right. So it's it's a really fun game. It's super immature. But yeah, I mean it's one that it's hard to find because it was a late release for the 64. But it's a lot of fun. I had fun with it.
This is just one of the weirdest things that exists, right? And a weird thing to do with the character. I mean, this is just such an interesting story that how this thing happened. I feel like I want to watch like a documentary about how this thing happened. Someone should make that.
Well, hey, that gives me an idea to maybe do that. So I'll make sure I'll reach out to those developers that are, I'm sure really wanting to talk about it.
I'm sure.
So, but moving on to number 18. Now, this is probably a lot of people are going, I'm sorry, you put this here?
Yeah.
And that is Mario Kart 64 at number 18. We didn't want to put it super high on the list because we think there's better racing games. We didn't want to leave it off the list altogether because we don't want to be, blasted off the internet.
That's the only reason, though, because I totally
because we were both on the cusp here, but we decided that 18 is probably a good place to put it. It takes the original Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo, makes it look a little bit nicer, but it doesn't really innovate in a way that the later entries do. I think that the games have since gotten way better in each entry to the point where like Mario Kart 8 is the version to play, right? It's the best one. But it's a long ways away from what Mario Kart 64 was.
Oh yeah. And it's like, there's just not a whole lot in the game. I mean, I think that people have really fond memories of this because it's really fun to play multiplayer. And when you pull out the N64 with your friends, it's one of the first ones. You get Smash, you get Mario Kart. It's one of the first ones you play. But I mean, when you're as a single player like gamer, when you're sitting there at home, there's just not a whole lot there for you. It's like you get the gold on the things. There's no story mode. I mean, there's just not a lot in the game. I think in fact, when I'm just playing games by myself, I would prefer Super Mario Kart to Mario Kart 64. I have a lot more fun just playing that one on my own. I think the two Mario Kart games for me are that one and then Mario Kart 8. I think there's some good ones on the Game Boy Advance too, but yeah, this one it's cool. People have fond memories, but yeah, not the best kart racer on here.
No, it's there's a lot of nostalgia around it, and I think that's why people hold it in such high regard. But but that's it. That's entry number 18. I'm going to throw it over to you, Layne, for number 17 here.
All right, number 17 is Rayman 2: The Great Escape. Super fond memories of this game. I don't know. We might have to do some real-time fact checking here because this is another one of those. I'm not sure if this was the first Rayman 2 and then it was later ported to Dreamcast. Much later, it was ported to PlayStation 2 called Rayman Revolution. But I want to say that Rayman 2: The Great Escape first appeared on N64. You can real-time fact check me on that.
I'm checking it out.
It is a fantastic adventure game. One of my favorite games for the system. It has a lot of the same kind of qualities as something like Banjo-Kazooie, but the gameplay is a little bit different. It's kind of hard to explain how, but the world is a little bit darker than Banjo-Kazooie, which is really cool. The music has more of this kind of ethereal quality rather than the sort of like almost jokey nursery rhyme kind of quality of Banjo-Kazooie. And it introduces some really cool characters in the Rayman sort of universe that still exist in the Rayman games to this day. For my money, something like Rayman Origins or Rayman Legends are some of the best platformers I've ever played, like straight up 2D platformers. And this one was the one that kind of introduced a lot of those characters into the Rayman universe. So yeah, no, highly recommended. I think that for whatever reason, people complain about sort of the N64 fog on some of these games where, especially I remember in Turok Dinosaur Hunter, it can be really hard to play because you just can't see 10 feet in front of your character because
Right.
64 had like a hard time rendering things. But in Rayman 2, that effect actually works super well. I'd actually sort of compare it to like watching a movie on VHS or something. It gives you, or a Disney movie on VHS rather than Blu-ray. It kind of fills in the gaps a little bit and makes it just feel a little bit more mystical, magical, whatever. So anyway, great game, Rayman 2, The Great Escape.
Yeah, and I was unable to find exactly when things came out. It does look like the 64 version predates some of the other ones, but I could only find European release dates for some reason, so I'm not really too sure why. But them's the breaks, I guess.
Yeah, that's all right. If someone wants to correct me, you do have a chat? Can they correct me in the chat?
No, we don't have. Yeah, we're not. We don't have that. We're not.
Yeah.
We're not that advanced. But you can tweet at us, and we'll let the corrections department take care of it.
The corrections department, good.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we're gonna move on now to number 16, and you're gonna be breaking down Snowboard Kids 2 for us, Layne.
Yeah, Snowboard Kids 2. So I originally, when I was making this list, we both made our own copies and then sort of synthesized. I had Snowboard Kids 2, and 1080 snowboarding on the list. And I was like, you know what? That's probably too many snowboarding games for the top 25 list. I think they're all great. What Snowboard Kids 2 has sort of the advantage over the first one is this awesome story mode. The first one, I don't remember if it has a story mode. The thing I remember about the first one is you do a lot of cool things. You unlock like this ninja character, which is super cool. Mm-hmm. But in Snowboard Kids 2, there's this great story mode where you buy like upgrades for your characters and snowboards and everything. It's kind of like a mix of 1080 snowboarding and Diddy Kong Racing, where it is this story mode with these colorful, lovable characters, and it has like the gameplay of something like 1080 snowboarding. It doesn't feel as fast as 1080 snowboarding. It's a little bit slower. Snowboard Kids and Snowboard Kids 2. But this one I just remember being amazed by. I think this was a game a lot of people rented, like at Blockbuster. So same thing with the first Snowboard Kids. I think it's a little bit harder to find for that reason. But my buddy, I remember next door, when the first time I ever really played a lot of N64, my friend next door had it. He rented Snowboard Kids 2, and I remember spending the night at his house and just having the time of our lives with this game. So yeah, highly recommended. Really cool. Kind of like a little bit more obscure title, both of those Snowboard Kids games, but both are super worth picking up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and they're definitely a sign of the time, being the late 90s. And the next title I won't spend too much time on because I've talked about it at length previously. Number 15, we're gonna go Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It just simply put is, even though the N64 version is not as good as the PlayStation 1 version, it is still the poster child for Tony Hawk games. Tony Hawk 2, I believe, had a perfect score from damn near every publication, and really is like I said, it's a snapshot into the late 90s and extreme game culture and things like that. But I'm going to move quickly here to number, was it 14? 14.
Yep.
Number 14 is WWF No Mercy. Of course, if the game was to be released today, we would have to call it WWE No Mercy.
You got that info. That's what this show is for.
Right, exactly. Of course, because the World Wildlife Foundation said you can't use WWF anymore. So literally, animal rights activists took out a multi-billion-dollar wrestling corporation somehow. But WWF No Mercy is the kind of the ultimate version of what THQ is doing with wrestling games on Nintendo 64. It starts originally with WCW and World Tour, then WCW versus NWO Revenge, and then we get WWF No Mercy, which brings a lot more of like the creator wrestler stuff. A lot more of the gameplay is it's cleaner, it's better better graphics and different things like that. So really excellent game. Definitely worth checking out. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we've spent a decent amount of time talking about WWF games in this podcast in the past. Being, of course, that we are also a wrestling podcast that exists on the Wrestling Podcast Network.
We could do like a whole episode. We should like play that game, and
we could. Yeah, I mean, I've been kicking around starting a Twitch channel, Layne.
There you
So
go.
I mean, maybe we'll just have to stream No Mercy at some point.
That'd be super fun.
But yeah, I'm going to throw it over to you for our 13th entry here, Layne. Turok 2
right.
Seeds of Evil.
Yeah, this is like one of my favorite games ever. But you have to make some concessions because it's like you can make this like if you make a personal list, like here's my favorite games, it's not going to line up with like being objective about it and everything. I'm just super glad this is on here. Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. It's my favorite Turok game. Probably, oh man, I'll get a lot of hate. I don't know if it's my favorite first-person shooter on the N64, but it definitely ranks with them. So a lot of people argue about Perfect Dark and GoldenEye, both fantastic games that you may hear about later. You will hear about later. But Turok 2 Seeds of Evil is right up in there with them, and I think that it's different though. If Perfect Dark is sort of mission-based, same thing with GoldenEye. They're kind of similar games to each other. Turok 2 is this sprawling adventure kind of shooter. With maps that I think were bigger than any console first-person shooter that had ever existed before. People would actually have seen articles and game facts and everything that would actually like talk about how big the levels were compared to some other games, just to show how giant these levels were. And in fact, they were so giant that it kind of works to the game's detriment for some people, because it's like a level would go on and on. It was very difficult. So it's like, how could you like get through this? It takes forever. Right. But this is something like, and so as a kid, this game was trash because I couldn't get past the first stage. But, as I returned to it, I just was amazed by how the sprawling scale of it. Also, the story is really cool in this game. It made me want to actually figure out what Turok was. There's not a whole lot of good Turok games after the N64 either.
No.
And this one, it also, even for people who don't know, a whole lot about Turok, everyone remembers the cerebral bore from Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, this weapon that you shoot, and it literally is a homing device that goes into the enemy's brain and just graphically, shoots their brains out of their head. I'd never seen anything like that before.
It is worth noting that these games, all Turok games, are rated mature. And there's very good reason for that, right? I mean, I played through the first Turok game, which had a freeze ray that froze the enemies, and then you would hit them with your tomahawk, and they would shatter into bloody pieces. So yeah, I mean, Turok 2, from the parts that I've played, it definitely ratchet up the violence. From the first one, and I think too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Layne. Is this the one where you can fly the pterodactyl around?
I don't think so.
Or is that 3?
I think it might be 3 because 3 I didn't play. 3 had like you could play as these kids or whatever. I don't think you played as like Turok the whole time. There were like you could pick between these two characters that were sort of caught up in this invasion kind of plot. But I only played it a little. I think it's, what is it called? Oblivion, Turok 3.
Shadow of Oblivion, yes.
Yeah. And then there's Turok Rage Wars, which is just like, hey, this multiplayer is awesome. So we're just going to make a game that's just the multiplayer. And so that was kind of the whole, and all 4 of those games, or what, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, all 4 of those games are super worth picking up. But I think this is the best one. Just a quick, one of my earliest memories of Turok is I was at a friend's house and I felt bad that we were playing it because it was rated M, and my parents certainly wouldn't want me to do that. And my friend said, oh no, it's okay. You can actually turn off the blood.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And he's like, oh, but you could also make it green if you want. So when I actually called, I was a good little boy. I called my parents and I was negotiating with them. I was like, so you can make the blood green or you can turn the blood off. And I had to like call them and get their permission. I think they told me that I had to turn the blood off. I don't think green was a good negotiation.
didn't change it enough, I guess. No, I think there was also a paintball mode that you could do, and like big head mode and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
It was Acclaim. Every Acclaim game they ever made, there's a big head mode for some goddamn reason. I just don't understand it. But and that goes for NFL Blitz and things like that too.
Yeah.
Which, yes, I know. Before we get any further, I'm just going to say, if you came onto this podcast hoping for NFL Blitz to show up on this list, it doesn't. But stick around because there is some stuff that you're going to love hearing about. But NFL Blitz is not a part of it. Sorry, guys.
And isn't that better on other, like, wasn't Blitz better on like Dreamcast and stuff, or was the?
I don't know. I'd say Dreamcast, but it's certainly an arcade game. And ports for arcade games are messy. It actually is really good on 64.
Okay.
But it just it didn't make the list. Sorry, guys.
Gotcha. Well, you want to hit up number 12?
Yeah, let's go number 12, right? So we talked about Shadows of the Empire. Number 12 is Star Wars Rogue Squadron. And this game is one of the best flight sim shooters that is not on rails. And that's worth noting because up to this point, a lot of flying games existed on a rail system. There's no rails. You have an area specific to the mission that you're playing. You do get to do the Battle of Hoth. You get to do the Death Star trench run. And all of this is done in a pretty awesome view, right? You could do third person. You could do cockpit views. You could, it was a really cool game. It's one of those things where, like, I think we were victims of the moment some because the Rogue Squadron books were really popular then. Wedge has become a more popular character, I think, for a lot of really big Star Wars nerds as the years have gone by. I know, like, for me, like, people would ask me who my favorite Star Wars character was in the 90s, and the answers were always Dash Rendar and Wedge Antilles. I had no movie data to back up either of those. It was strictly because of the books and the games on the Nintendo 64. So yeah, Rogue Squadron at number 12. It just seems like a right fit there. It's a really, really good game, really clean game. I don't remember the game having bad glitches or anything. It's just super smooth. So, for me, in that era, especially when you don't experience frame rate drop and you don't experience bad glitching, that's a huge win in the 64-bit era. But yeah, so that's my number 12 there. And we're going to go for the last game here of part 1. And this is one that we both really loved, and Layne mentioned it earlier. It's going to be Banjo-Kazooie. Not Banjo-Tooie, although that I think that was a good sequel. But the original Banjo-Kazooie is, in my opinion, one of the better 3D platformers to exist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We mentioned one thing you'll notice is not on this list is Donkey Kong 64, which we both sort of thought that the other one was going to put on the list, but then neither of us wanted to because really, and a lot of people love Donkey Kong 64, but it basically takes the really pure and fluid and good and working formula of Banjo-Kazooie and says, basically, we're going to take that times 6. And it's just one of the best examples of more not being more, because Banjo-Kazooie is just sort of like the perfect, perfectly balanced experience.
Yeah, it's worth noting too. It is the same developer for Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, of course, being Rare, who we are not done with on this list. Rare was doing anything and everything they could. They really tied themselves to the 64. But coming up with a original character in Banjo-Kazooie, of course, Banjo is a bear, Kazooie is a bird that rides on its back. It's really just the things you do in this game are just bonkers, and you really like sit there and go, and not to be confused, with the video game character bonkers. But it really makes you go like, huh. Like that's, the game design is something that you didn't see, and it was using 3D platforming in such a really good way too, that a lot of it was vertical platforming versus just horizontal platforming. And I think this is one of the first games to really take that and make traversing those vertical areas more challenging, and then also from a development standpoint more creative.
Mm-hmm. The one game that really reminds me of this is, and I was talking to you about this before, but I've been playing Mario Odyssey, And I think that game owes a lot to this game. And to Rare in general, and another game we're going to talk about later, but the whole style of like, oh, I'm going to go in this room, and then it becomes sort of this little mini game kind of experience, or a mini sort of kind of like obstacle course kind of thing. I mean, that really reminds me of Banjo-Kazooie, where you would talk to this person and like, oh, hey, you have to do this thing to get this puzzle piece or whatever. And I think in a lot of ways, Mario Odyssey owes more of that style to Banjo-Kazooie than even the Mario series. It feels like that to me anyway. So
yeah, no, I can't disagree with you there. I think Banjo-Kazooie is a great game to end with part 1 of our top 25 list for the top 25 games of the Nintendo 64. Tune in next episode. We will come back with our top 10. I promise that you won't want to miss it. Although after listening to it, maybe you will want to miss it. I don't know. But yeah, no, definitely check us out. Make sure you're listening to all of the podcasts on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Make sure you're heading over to ProWrestlingTees.com/Social Suplex. Pick up your 8-Bit Suplex t-shirt today. And then go ahead and follow us on at 8-Bit Suplex. And we'll see you next time.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the 8-Bit Suplex Podcast. See you next time.
There's just something about getting away to the Smoky Mountains. Step out on a hiking trail, zoom across a zip line, splash at water parks, shop till you drop, and say hello to the statue of our hometown hero, Dolly Parton. Discover the thrill of visiting the Smoky Mountains and reconnect with those you love the most in Sevierville, Tennessee. Learn more at visitsevierville.com. That's visit SEVIERVILLE.com.
Los pros comienzan el día aprovechando los servicios exclusivos en Lowe's. No solo ofrecemos clavos, tendrás aire comprimido gratis para tus ruedas y tanques portátiles, estacionamiento de remolques para pros cuando vengas de compras, un lugar para limpiar tu parabrisas y una bebida energética para despertarte. Aquí tu día empieza más rápido pagando en cajeros solo para pros. Por eso Lowe's es el nuevo hogar de los pros, solo en Estados Unidos.